Hello, welcome to Only for Your Ears, and today's episode 20, The Flying Trunk, which I've renamed as Fortune Shines on the Most Fortunate. The structure will be the same. First, we'll start off with a summary, which will highlight the most important points, and I'll digress. There will be a little reflection at the end of each paragraph, which I'll note down. Then we'll move on to how this story plays in society through my critical review, which I will frame by using sentences from summary 1. And then we'll end with the trigger points. There are some trigger points, and there may be no trigger points, but just something that I wanted to add on at the end. So let's begin. The Flying Trunk, which I've renamed as Fortune Shines on the Most Fortunate. The Flying Trunk is a fairy tale by Hans Christian Andersen about a young man who inherits a magical flying trunk after squandering fortune. His fortune, I should say. I digress. Talk about attracting fortune. The story explores themes of magic, love, imagination, and personal virtues. The reflection is the young man carelessly, in squandering his fortune, demonstrates the negative consequences of extravagant and reckless behavior. The story serves as a cautionary tale, reminding readers of the importance of managing resources responsibly. I digress. Yes, in reality, this is true, but not so much in this fairy tale, though. The young man, having spent all his wealth, finds himself with nothing left but a magical trunk, which has power to transport him anywhere he wishes. I digress. He's obviously not so down on his luck. He decides to use the trunk to visit a faraway land where he learns about a beautiful princess who is locked away in a copper castle. The king has decreed that whoever can tell the most amazing stories will be allowed to marry the princess. I digress. Not only did this man inherit wealth and squander it, but he has also buckets of charm, no doubt. The young man uses the flying trunk to visit the princess at night and tells her fantastic stories. I digress. He will seduce this princess with storytelling and immense charisma. But of course, which she enjoys immensely. Each night, she shares a new story, and falls in love. The princess suggests that he tell the same stories to her father, the king, to win her hand in marriage. I digress. His cleverness and imagination is as vast as the ocean. However, the young man decides to make up an even more incredible story for the king. Reflection on his actions. Resourcefulness and resilience. Despite losing his fortune, the young man manages to make the most of his situation by using the magical trunk to embark on an adventure. This demonstrates the value of resourcefulness and resilience in overcoming challenges and adversity. I digress. This is what most people that are immigrants, for example, or let's just say travelers, have to do all the time. Being resourceful has very little to do with academia or academics. It has more to do with making do with the limited or no means that you have or don't have, and just make the most of it by being creative. On the day of the storytelling contest, the young man flies to the king's palace in his magical trunk. Unfortunately, the trunk accidentally catches fire. I digress. Now, this is a tragic state of events, leaving him without a way to prove his stories. Dejected, he is forced to leave without the princess. I digress. This is sad but true, and it's a more realistic tone to the story. Years pass, and the young man continues to tell his stories, becoming a renowned storyteller. I digress. This man had the gift of the gab. Although he never reunites with the princess, their true love endures in the story he shares with others. I digress again. That sounds like a real never-ending love. Dangerous Liaisons, which stars Michelle Pfeiffer and John Malkovich, had something that I would call just as passionate and never-ending like this story in The Tale. The transformative power of love plays a significant role in the story, as the young man's feelings for the princess motivate him to change his ways and to strive for a better life. I digress. This suggests that love has the power to inspire personal growth and transformation. It most certainly does. And it most certainly did in this story. The Flying Trunk serves as a cautionary tale about the consequences of extravagance and emphasizing the power of true love, imagination, and personal virtues. It highlights the importance of resourcefulness and the ability to captivate others through storytelling. I digress. What a beautiful story. It really is a beautiful story. From the beginning, it sounded as though he was just going to have his cake and eat it, and it was going to be just hunky-dory. But the resourcefulness and his ability to continue and make a mark for himself in the world of being a storyteller, an author, is what's truly magical and valuable, and the love that he had. His character was changed. I don't think it was changed by the fact that he ran out of money, but he was changed by the experiences that he had through telling his stories and falling in love with the princess. And now for my critical review on how this fairy tale plays in society today. Well, at first, I didn't think this would be a very inspiring fairy tale to review when it came to a comparison to how things were in the past until now, but I was wrong. This narrative is loaded with important philosophical reflections that shed light on how we process relationships today. The young man is forced to venture on a journey of experiencing his school of life, where he's spreading wisdom wherever he travels. I'm going to use sentences where I digressed in the summary to frame my review. So let's begin. The first, I digress. Talk about fortune attracting the most fortunate. The story explores themes of magic, love, imagination, and personal virtues. This reminds me of the expression, change yourself and fortune will change. Well, he certainly did change himself. He changed himself through the misfortune that he had, and then he created fortune again in his life by becoming the true person that he was meant to be. The young man's fortune changed after he squandered all his money, but he was able to take a risk with his flying trunk and experience something far more precious than his wealth. A lot of people want to be wealthy. So when they win the lottery, there's more than enough money than they have ever dealt with. And within 3 years, the money has gone and they have nothing to show for it but debt. And no recovery, no real recovery from the debt. They just stay in debt and that's it. I'm reminded of the film Indecent. They just stay in debt. This is because they start to live beyond their means and try to keep up with the Joneses. This is a typical expression in English. I'm reminded of the film Indecent Proposal, when a young couple were poor and needed money to pay off their debt and start afresh. A wealthy businessman offers a young woman a proposal. It's a test, really, including the fact that he finds Demi Moore's character attractive. The rich man is played by Robert Redford. The woman questions the morality of the proposition, and Redford says everyone has a price. This is unfortunately true, but what kind of price are we talking about? Just financial or morality or emotionally or health-wise, and on and on. It appears there was a loss in translation somewhere, because even though Demi Moore's character fell for the money, it made her feel cheap. So she had all this money, but at the price of feeling cheap. Whereas with Redford, he was happy with his result by sleeping with an attractive woman desperate for money to save her young marriage and toss her $1 million to prove he was right. Yes, he was right, but listen to what happens next. However, in the end, he was wrong. The young couple talked it over and decided to donate the money to a charity. This is because Redford knows the young woman will never love him like she loves her husband. So he thought he could just simply buy her. Everybody has a price, but deep down inside, she felt cheap. It's like the fact that she felt cheap was just as overwhelming as the material, physical form of the money, if not more. And then Robert Redford's character proves that in some ways he was wrong, because he actually started to have feelings for her and fell in love with her. And he realized no matter how much money he threw at her, she would never, ever love him like she loved her husband. This is because Redford knows that the young woman will never love him like she loves her husband. Money can buy good sex, but it really can't buy love. Not really. This is noted at the end of the fairy tale. The storyteller pledges his undying love for the princess for the rest of his life. He has money. He becomes a renowned author. But in his heart, he carries the burning passion and the true love for the first woman that he really fell in love with. Let's take a look at the second part of my review. The next is I digress. Yes, this is true, but not so much in this fairy tale, though. The scenario only happens amongst the top 5%, not the upper class like the Rockefellers and Christina Onassis, who is the deceased daughter of the late Greek magnate Aristotle Onassis, is also dead. For example, if their sons and daughters ever squandered a couple of £1 million, they'd still be rolling in dough from their parents' fortune and handouts. But a person from a less fortunate family, like the man from the fairy tale, not everybody would be as resourceful as this man. And he didn't have all that money. He squandered it, he finished it, and it was over. So in some cases, you get the top 5% that it doesn't matter if they're a child or if they squander a couple of million. That's nothing. That's not even a dent in their fortune. And what's really interesting is Christina Onassis. She was worth over $8 billion when she died, when she committed suicide. And it didn't matter how much money she had. She was desperately unhappy. See, what Christina Onassis really, truly wanted. She wanted love. She wanted true love. And money, no matter how much money you have, that cannot buy you true love. Her daughter now, who grew up in Sweden and is an equestrian rider, a sports figure, is worth a little under $1 billion. But she is happy. She has been taught that love is the most important thing, whereas her mother, unfortunately, money was the most important thing. She didn't even know how to self-love. I can imagine that the father of this Christina Onassis' daughter had treated her differently, and that she knows how to not only love herself, she knows how to receive love and give love without it always being connected to money. In the fairy tale. So, but somebody like this man in the fairy tale was less fortunate. But what was incredible about this particular man, he was resourceful. He had the ability, he had an imagination, he was creative, and he knew how to create fortune, different types of fortune, out of nothing. And the most important fortune of all was love. And he was able to have that, and that filled his heart for the rest of his life. So money can get you so far. And in this world that we live in, it can really get you very far. It's considered the most important thing, I think, in society today. If you have no money, it's very, very difficult to survive. But we won't talk about that too much because I have my own story, which I'll share later. The older son was in the field, and as he came closer to the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of his servants and asked what all this meant. Okay, now this comes from the Bible. This is an interesting story. It comes from Luke, and it's about two sons and the father. And I think it's the youngest son. He decides that he wants his inheritance now, and he wants to leave and travel the world. Well, he does. And then he comes back poor and dejected. So here's a part from the Bible that I want to share with you. The servant said, "Your brother has come back, and your father killed a fat calf because your brother came home safely. The oldest son, now this is the oldest son that feels like, I stayed here and I worked. Whereas the little baby, the spoilt baby, went off and did what he wanted to do. The older son was angry and would not go to the feast. So his father went out and begged him to come in. But the older son said to his father, I have served you all like a slave for many years and have always obeyed your commands. But you never gave me even a young goat to have at a feast with my friends. But your son, who wasted all your money on prostitutes, comes home and you kill a fat calf for him. The father said to him, son, you are always with me, and all I have is yours. We had to celebrate and be happy because your brother was dead, but now he is alive. He was lost, but now he is found. So in this situation, you have the situation where the parent forgives the child's stupidity and squandering his money irresponsibly. And of course, he's the youngest. He's the baby. Of course, he will be forgiven probably a lot more than if it was the eldest child that did this, because the eldest child is supposed to know better. So I digress. This is what most people that are immigrants or immigrants, or let's just say travelers, must do all the time. Being resourceful has very little to do with academia. It has to do with making do with the limited means that you have or don't have, and just make the most of it by being creative. Suits, for example, is a TV program which starred Prince Harry's wife. It's about a law firm and the different style of how each lawyer finds solutions to problems. The series begins with a young man that has a photographic memory, taking an entrance exam into Harvard for a friend of his. Anyway, he meets up with one of the younger partners who's looking for a new talent because he fits the mold and he possesses what most partners do have and don't have, and that is street smarts. He possesses. Some of the partners do have street smarts, but most of them don't. The young man is also very resourceful and comes up with creative ideas that boggles the law firm's minds. Now, this man is incredible. He's really, really, really creative. He's also very academic. He just didn't have the money. He just simply did not have the money to be able to pursue his career. And when he was found, he was taking entrance exams for other people and getting money. Well, anyway, he works for this company and he is like one of the top lawyers because he's so incredible because of his resourcefulness again. His ability to create something worthy and valuable out of very minimal means. And when I find myself thinking about Spain, I think about people from Andalusia, the place called Granada, La Rambla, one of the seventh wonders of the world in Andalusia. Now, Catalonia was very industrial. It had its factories, it had so many natural resources that that Catalans could work, and they had a strong workforce. Whereas in Andalusia, they had wonderful hot weather, but they didn't have those natural resources that they had up in the north in Catalonia. So a lot of Andalusians migrated, and left Andalusia and came into the north part of Spain along the coastline where Catalonia was located. And they worked very, very hard, as much as Catalans still today want to consider Andalusians lazy. Let me tell you something, being an immigrant myself, immigrants are not lazy. I would say 90% of immigrants are not lazy, and they're very, very resourceful because they have no choice but to be. These people, including myself, we had to be as resourceful as the man in the story, creating something out of nothing, creating stories so he could have a living and be renowned throughout the land. Not all immigrants are renowned and famous, but a lot of immigrants, if they leave one country and they go to another country to make it, if they don't think they're resourceful when they first arrive there, by the time they get there, they become resourceful. Now, let's take a look at the trigger points. Now, the trigger points. There weren't too many things that triggered me. There were about one or two parts that triggered me, but the last part didn't. But let's go to one of the sentences. I digress. That sounds like a real never-ending love. Dangerous liaisons with Michelle Pfeiffer and John Malkovich explain. The transformative power of love. Love plays a significant role in the story, as the young man's feelings for the princess motivate him to change his ways and to strive for a better life. Well, I have seen this, unbeknownst to me, when a certain player came into my life. But let's go back to Dangerous Liaisons. Now, John Malkovich's character plays a player. He just goes with all these different women. He wants to destroy their careers, destroy their reputation. And so they become unworthy in a man's eyes when it comes to marrying them. He can't marry them after he's destroyed their reputation. And Glenn Close is the main protagonist. And she is like a total narcissist. And she sends John Malkovich's character out, go out and find some woman to destroy, or I'll give you a name to destroy. Anyway, he comes across Michelle Pfeiffer's character, has been divorced for about 17 years. No, not divorced, a widow for 17 years, a church-going woman, a God-fearing woman, and is celibate. Very beautiful. So Glenn Close's character says, I want you to taint this woman. And he just smiles. He goes, oh, this is too good to be true. So what he does, he pursues her like she's just some toy to play with. At the beginning, he finds it difficult. He wonders why. She's engaging him. She's getting into conversation with him. She's talking about God and life and love and death. And he gets more and more drawn into her, and he starts to develop feelings for her. And Glenn Close's character says, now it's time for you to make love to her, or not to make love, have sex. And he does. And he completely falls in love. They both fall in love with each other. It's just in a crazy, not crazy, but it's just the most beautiful love that you could have, the most purest form. And in the end, they both die. What happens is that she gets depressed because John Malkovich says he can't see her again. And then John Malkovich puts himself in the line of fire to be killed because he cannot live without Michelle Pfeiffer's character. So it's like it has a Romeo and Julio ending at the end, but it's true love. Well, unbeknownst to me, a certain player started to change their ways. He came into my life after we had a platonic relationship here in Canada. However, he decided that he was going to destroy it and turn me into a third party, which I didn't want to. He breadcrumbed me and awkwardly changed the friendship, which I was reluctant to do, and I didn't allow it to happen. I have now slowly moved on from being and what I have seen of this person, he has matured. He has grown up to a certain degree because he wanted to treat me like I was Michelle Pfeiffer's character, just like a toy. But we had a good friendship. We had great conversation. And he started to get pulled in. We both started to get pulled in, but he started to get pulled in more and more and more. And this became too much because he started to actually have feelings, real feelings. He got caught having feelings, and it was impossible for him to continue this game. He's tried to, but every time he does it, he ends up flat-footed. This is what happens when you play these games with people and you're a player. One day you get caught in your own game. And this is exactly what happened to him. And I happen to be the person that he caught feelings for. So in some ways, it triggered me. This whole thing about never-ending love and the transformative power of love. Because this person, even though he has grown and he has matured, there's no way that I can have anything to do with him apart from actually being friends. And you can have a deep platonic love in a friendship, and that's all it can possibly be. Whereas with John Malkovich, and in the story, I think it was more of a completed circle. It completed itself. I don't think in the story that the princess and this young man made love necessarily, but it was a different, the circle completed itself. They didn't really need to do that. And maybe in this situation, we don't need to do that. But that was quite interesting that I wanted to pick out. It taught me, even though it upset me because I'm not a toy and I wouldn't want anybody to be treated like a toy, but it taught me about the value of myself as a person. Number 2, I digress. Yes, this is true, but not so much in this fairy tale. The scenario only happens amongst the top 5% and the upper class with the Rockefellers and Christina Onassis, who is the deceased daughter of the late Greek magnate Aristotle Onassis. For example, if their sons and daughters ever squandered a couple of £1,000,000, they'd still be rolling in dough from their parents' fortune and handouts. This really triggered me, but not from the financial point of view, but from the relationship sensibility. My mother used my sister and I as weapons for interrelationship war within the family dynamic of the divorce, and it worked too. I think both my sister and I felt a sense of injustice when beatings were passed down. My father reached a point with me not to hit me because he had abandoned me as a daughter for his mistress's daughter. So he felt guilty and reprimanded me. And my mother used me to be her narcissistic supplier. I was supposedly her favorite, while my sister was treated as the enemy because she was my dad's favorite, and took her under his wing. Now, this wasn't a financial squandering, but it was more like an emotional, psychological betrayal, family betrayal, squandering of our loyalty, squandering of our emotions. Many years later, after I moved away from the home, the relationship dynamics changed. I became the one that abandoned my role as the narcissist supplier, and my sister took over that role because they both needed each other. My mother was able to play the dear mother financial rescuer as my sister fell upon hard times. I didn't have it easy either. Both my parents, including my stepdad, I would say parents, which included my stepdad, not my real father, helped me out too. But the balance of power changed because of her need for control, and to compete and manipulate her daughter was still in full gear. If she felt we had in any way betrayed her, now it's okay for them to betray us, but if it was on the other foot, by not playing the supplier like I did, she would play the cold withholding game like a true frugal economist. So our value, our loyalty was squandered by our parents, not by my stepdad, but by our parents. But it was different. It wasn't so much financial. The last trigger. I digress. His cleverness and imagination was as vast as the ocean. However, the young man decides to make up an even more incredible story for the king. This is not really a trigger in a negative way, but it stirred up important memories of a sense of determination and conquered my doubts. That conquered my doubts and pushed me forward to success. I'm reminded of the film In Pursuit of Happiness with Will Smith. Now, Will Smith turns out to be an absolutely brilliant, resourceful character. His wife has left him. So emotionally and psychologically, he's in deficit, and he has to look after his young boy, but 4 years old, and they have no where to live, and that they don't have any money, really. He's trying to make money, and then he joins this financial firm, and does a course, and he does incredibly well after really going through some really, really extremely hard times. He would do anything, not for money, but to achieve security for himself and his son. Well, in the end, he does. He passes the exam. He passes the test. He does extraordinarily well, and he gets the job. And at the end of the film, it's a true story. At the end of the film, he created a multi-million-dollar company that sold back in the early 90s for $150 million. That was outrageous back then. And his son's doing well. He was able to raise his son. We don't know what happened to the mother, but all I know is that she left. She was tired. She wanted to do her own thing. And I think there's a part of me that thinks when she found out that he was doing so well, I wonder how she felt. She might have said, damn, I wish I had held on just a little longer. It would have been a completely different situation. But who knows? Anyway, this is the end of Fortune Shines on the Most Fortunate. Thank you for listening. And I hope you have a great weekend, because it's a long weekend this weekend. And thank you so much for your views. I'd love for you to share this video and share this story. Subscribe. Show me some love. Give me a thumbs up. Subscribe and share. Okay, thank you very much. And we'll end with our typical phrase. Healing is a lifelong gift, blessing, and lesson we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Healing is a lifelong gift, blessing, and lesson we give ourselves, mind, body, and soul. Thank you very much. Until next time. Bye.